Hello, BookTube, and I'm here to do a tag. I don't do too many of these anymore, but this one I thought I would do, especially doing the Future History Project, the Isaac Asimov Future History. And this is Michael K. Vaughan's The Astounding Science Fiction tag. And he has 8 questions. And I've seen a few do this already. He just did it, I think, yesterday or earlier today, I should say, for most parts. And I'll post this immediately. It'll be sort of an extra video for myself. As I say, there's 8 questions with a couple, at least one sub-question. There's 2. So he says he only could do 8, but in a sense there are 10. The first question is, what was the first science fiction book that you read, and what did you think of it? I've been trying to rack my brain to find out which one was the first book. And I really am not 100% sure. I know I read quite a bit of stuff in my sort of late teens that were sort of science fiction. Probably mid to early teens that I started dabbling into some science fiction. And I remember at the time, well, I think this is going to be a common answer with many of us that have read science fiction of a certain age, I should say. It was Edgar Rice Burroughs, and I can't remember. It probably was Princess of Mars. I don't have a copy. This is sort of a stand-in for it. It's a Penguin Tarzan by Edgar Rice Burroughs, and there's a Penguin Princess of Mars too, which I just can't seem to locate it. I thought it was with this one, but it's not, because that was on the shelf. And we'll assume that Princess of Mars was, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I enjoyed the escape adventure of it, the adventure, all that, and it made me I did wind up reading almost everything Edgar Rice Burroughs wrote, but I can't remember whether Tarzan was the first Edgar Rice Burroughs or Princess of Mars. Doesn't really matter at this point, but I enjoyed it even so. I'm using my phone here to read the questions. What was the last science fiction book that you read, and what did you think of it? The last book that I read, like full book, I'm currently reading Isaac Asimov's robot stories for the Future History Project. But the last full novel I read was for my book to film, and that was Harry Harrison's Make Room. Horrible cover, but oh well. It was written in 1950, or was it 1966? Let me find a date here. Yeah, 1966. And it's a dystopian future set in 1999, where the human population on the Earth has skyrocketed, and New York City has over 35 million people in it. And it's sort of a mystery. It's a crime story. It follows Andy Roosh, a police officer who is trying to keep, law and order in a city that is just teeming with people trying to survive in any way they can. And there's a murder. And he expects to just sort of, be done over and done with it. But the powers that be want him to investigate more. And he does so. And he finds out a lot of interesting things along the way. And we get to see more of sort of the society that Harry Harrison has created, and showing that, humans, like, they will sort of, adapt as best they can to the circumstances one way or another. And it's I thought it was a very good book. They did a great film of it as well, but the film is very different than the book. At least the plot line is. They're different things, but they're both excellent. Let's see here. Number 3. If you love science fiction, what made you love science fiction? I suppose it was first, like growing up, watching old 1950s schlock science fiction films. But then, occasionally seeing something like, Forbidden Planet, which is a fabulous film, and a few that are really good, like Day the Earth Stood Still, and Invasion of the Body Snatchers, The Incredible Shrinking Man. And there were a lot of the schlock ones, but a lot of good ones. And then as at some point after that, I think I began seeing Star Trek, the original series, like a lot of people had, and it was always on repeat. And also Twilight Zone, and watching episodes of the Twilight Zone, and can't remember off the top of my head the other series that was Outer Limits. Outer Limits was a fabulous stories. And also radio broadcasts. I used to listen at night to an American station because I lived near sort of the nearby the American border, and we picked up a lot of American radio stations as well as TV stations. And listening to X-1, and other science fiction radio shows, and they really, I think set me up for loving science fiction, like originally when I was really young, and then when I started reading science fiction, so I knew what to sort of expect, and then was blown away by stuff as I continued to read. And this is a tough, very, very tough question. What is your favorite science fiction movie? That is very tough because a lot of times I don't think a lot of science fiction movies are very good. And even the best ones are a bit shaky at times, but they're enjoyable, and I mentioned a few. I don't know. That's really, really tough. I would say possibly Day the Earth Stood Still is up there. It's really hard to pick a favorite. And then, Planet of the Apes, Soylent Green that I mentioned, the Make Room, Make Room. I even liked Omega Man. I'm just trying to think what... Well, yeah, 2001: A Space Odyssey, Forbidden Planet, like all those were, I think, great, but science fiction films, I think, have been lacking real quality because it's the nature of the beast. It's entertainment above anything else, and I did love The Thing, the original The Thing, 1951, The Thing, even though it's so vastly different from John W. Campbell's story, but yeah, I enjoyed that. And question 5, what is your favorite science fiction TV show? That's easy. Babylon 5, without a doubt. With all its faults, rickety start at times, and, the cutoff at the end because they thought they were going to lose the final season. It was set out to tell a story in 5 seasons for 5 years. And it was paced out that way. And I keep going back to the phrase, it has a sense of wonder, and that does, and awesomeness and the awe of the possible universe. And the creator, writer, J. Michael Straczynski, drew on so much old science fiction. Like E. Doc Smith's the Lensman series with the ships, the battles, and things like that. It's sort of a homage to it, and even there's a homage to a scene of Forbidden Planet that comes up in a few episodes, and also one of the characters was named after a fabulous science fiction writer, Alfred Bester. Yeah, to me, it's head and shoulders above everything else in its totality. And you look at it as a whole, you know. But yeah, that's easy to do. Babylon 5. Number 6, which science fiction books do you feel should be read more often, or book? Well, I think there's many writers. I think Steve Donahue has mentioned it in his, that a lot of older material, the golden age, it's no longer in print, or it's harder to find these days than it was. You have to search out used copies. One writer I think deserves re-looking at these days is Clifford D. Simak, and especially City, and that will crop up in a moment or two. Other writers, like Edmund Hamilton, at the sort of dawn of science fiction, you know, actual science fiction in the magazines, late 20s and 30s. Yeah, and A.E. Van Vogt, Ian O. Bender, Binder, sorry, I keep saying Bender, thinking of the robot from the cartoon TV show, Futurama. But yeah, and there's many others that are sort of the period that I think deserve a new look, you know, a look in again, but with a more open attitude to it, that you have to realize that these are products of the time, and a lot of times written for just sheer enjoyment, but also some of the ideas and the scope of their stories are just breathtaking. And so I would say, but I would definitely say, well, say for instance, City, but that is in print, or it was, with the Masters of Cinema by Golan's, or Orion Books, which is an imprint of one or the other now. Number 7, what is your favorite science fiction short story? Again, this is a bit difficult. Off the top of my head, I would say Huddling Place by Clifford Simak, which is part of the City stories. But there are so many others. I mentioned like a lot of the early stories of Edmund Hamilton, because he did a series sort of Galactic Patrol. And I recently reread Star Stealers and thoroughly enjoyed it. It was a complete romp, but it's this big idea of spaceship, daring do, you know, going out and conquering. So there's lots of faults to it, but it's just so fabulous. And again, it's sort of favorite rather than best, because those are two different things, or can be two different things. And also so many stories by A.E. Van Vogt, Ian O. Binder. Again, I read the I, Robot, which was just fabulous, and he wrote a series of them. It's about Adam Link, a robot, and I think they're all told in the first person. At least the first one is I, Robot, is told in the first person by the robot Adam, and it's so good. It's more than just a robot story that is sort of menace and, you know, Frankenstein complex. But yeah, I would say Huddling Place, though, as the main answer for this, by Clifford D. Simak. And number 8, what is your favorite science fiction book? Again, favorite, not necessarily the best, but my favorite is it's the same as Michael K. Vaughan's, and that's City by Clifford D. Simak. I tried to look for my copy of it, the Masters of Cinema. I just reread it last year. Again, I've read it like 12, 15, 20 times. I don't know how many times, but I usually had read it every year, and I lapsed for a couple years, or well, for 8 years or so. So I'm going to start that tradition again of rereading it every year, and probably rereading the Huddling Place story at least a couple times a year, as I used to do. But yeah, so that's clearly to me, and that's an easy answer. It's City by Clifford Simak. It's just it covers vast ideas. Michael K. Vaughan read a bit of a foreword from the Easton Press volume, which talks about well, it's written by Simak and his inspiration of why he thought he would write the stories. It's basically it goes through from the second story on. The main character is a robot called Jenkins, and it's to deal with the Webster family all the way through. And it goes that because with missiles, intercontinental missiles, the target is cities. So therefore, if everybody moves out into the countryside, you no longer have cities. You no longer really have hard targets. That's the idea. Well, willing suspension of disbelief needed for a lot of science fiction. And so that's the premise. So people move out into the country. And as I say, it deals with the Webster family. And at some point, they're doing exploration on other planets, and on Jupiter, and there are creatures on Jupiter that can live there, and they've developed a machine that can change a human into one of these creatures and live out there. And it's sort of like Nirvana, paradise. It opens up the brain and all this kind of stuff. And along with other a new Martian philosophy, and also there's mutants that are in here that are extremely smart. It's jam packed, but basically most humans go to live on Jupiter, and so the Earth gets depleted. So it's left with dogs who have been uplifted, if you want to call it that, by surgical and genetic means to talk, and the robots that are there to help them and to teach them. But eventually the dogs go, and Jenkins is left. The ants have sort of taken over the planet, but then they've disappeared some mysteriously. And mice. Field mice. And Jenkins, there's an epilogue that was written for John W. Campbell Memorial Album. I'm not sure if it was a memorial. Yeah, it must have been a memorial, yeah. And Simak wrote an epilogue to it where Jenkins leaves, so the planet is inherited by mice. So there's the Astounding Science Fiction tag, and Michael K. Vaughan and everybody's just tagging everyone. So it is a fun tag, and I will try to see if I can get the questions down below, as well as Michael K. Vaughan's link to the video. I hope everybody's doing well. I'll see you next time, BookTube.